When you do research, it's hard to know what you can trust. And that's simply because we have so much information at our fingertips that we are spoiled for choice for where we should look for our information. But then the problem of that is, which information can we trust? Should we choose gut feeling? Should we go based on what the internet tells us to? Maybe there's a better tool. And today we're going to talk about something called RADAR, which is an acronym that stands for rationale, authority, date, accuracy, and finally, relevance. So let's talk about each part of RADAR and how it can help you evaluate sources that you'll use for your own research. Let's start with R. That starts with rationale. So rationale is basically the idea of why was the source created in the first place, right? Someone must have created this information. What was their intention in creating that information? The reason we have to ask this is because sometimes the intentions are great. We wanted to share information. We wanted to add to the science literature. But unfortunately, sometimes there are intentions that might be ulterior motives in the sense that they also want to make money. They also want to increase their brand or sell you a product. So all of these things have to be considered when it comes to any source that you might be evaluating. So let's look through different kinds of case studies that might give you an idea of what a good and bad example might look like for rationale. So there is a source called Natural News, and this is a source in which you're often going to find a lot of science news, which is great, but they have a lot of advertising within the website. Now, a lot of websites do, so that doesn't sound too bad. But what's concerning especially about this news source is that there's a lot of advertising specifically about supplements and other medical remedies that they're trying to sell you. The problem with this is that we have no idea if those supplements and medical remedies truly can be trusted, if they've been evaluated, are they just being prescribed from a doctor, or are you just buying it randomly online? So what they're trying to promote to you seems a little bit suspect. And on the other hand, we have a source called This Week in Virology. And this is a good example because the rationale is that this is a news source that is created by individuals who work in the field of virology. They chat and write articles and explain virology. And they do it as a hobby. It's a non-for-profit, so the intentions seem as if they just want to increase the information and dialogue and discourse around the topic of virology. Let's move on to A. A standing for authority. So authority is basically who is presenting the information. And that is, are they a person in which we can trust that they are an authority voice within that field? So if I want information on microbiology, I will look for a microbiologist. Sounds simple enough. But with everything being so complicated online, it's not so easy to immediately be able to pick out all the microbiologists from the non-microbiologists. So what's really important with authority is you need to ask yourself, is this someone who has done other works? For example, if it's the first thing they've ever published, can you expect them or trust them to be an authority figure within that field? Maybe, but it requires a little bit of extra analysis, I'll say. The other thing is there a pre-existing reputation that already exists? For example, certain scientists already have a reputation as being leaders within their field, whereas some scientists have a certain reputation of maybe not being so honest academically. So having an understanding of their current reputation, of their previous works, this all helps you to understand authority. And I've been talking about individuals, but this also is true of organizations as well. Certain organizations have terrible reputations because they consistently lie, but some organizations are known for being very factual and for very rigorous editing processes to make sure everything that they publish is of high quality. So let's use some examples. In terms of authority, we have a pretty bad example to start us off, and that's Reddit. Reddit obviously is a great forum for individuals to discuss. And that allows for a lot of information sharing, and that allows for a lot of conversation. But how much of it comes from a source of authority? Hard to tell. One of the things about Reddit is that it is anonymous. So someone can go onto that platform and say, hello, I am an expert in the subject. You can trust me. And then you go, can I? Because it's not something you can really verify. Even if they say that they are someone that is an expert in that field, there's simply no way to verify it. So Reddit, although very great for discussion, might not be the best source of research. But there's another source. It's called Bite-Sized Bio. And this source actually allows you to feel a little bit more confident about who is creating the material. And the reason is they have a rigorous process in who is allowed to be the people involved in the editing and writing process. In fact, they have a committee of individuals who actually act as people who verify and make sure that anyone working on anything that they put out are indeed experts, or at least scientists with some kind of experience within the research that they do, or any of the information that they put out. Let's now move on to D. D standing for date. Now, date is a very important thing to talk about because we might assume automatically whatever is the newest information is always the best. So typically that is the case, right? If something was proven in 1980 and then disproven in 2000 and then that was disproven in 2020, sure, we will take the most updated version of information. But we also want to make sure that the foundational pieces of information that might come from a long time ago are not also discredited. Date is very important because you also need to know when your sources are created so that you have an understanding of if they still apply today. So, for example, I'm not going to use a story that was created 10 years ago if there's a story that was on the same topic created 1 year ago. So date is a very important aspect in how you analyze everything. So let's use some examples here. So there's a source called Science News, and they create good articles that reference other academic papers, which is great. But the problem is there's a little bit of an inconsistency. Science News themselves create articles about other previously published academic journals or academic papers. Now the problem is perhaps they have a news story that was published and released in 2024, but they source an experiment or a study that was done in previous years. So although the news source sounds or looks like 2024 information, it might actually be citing and sourcing a study that was done in 2020, for example. So being very vigilant, not just about when the article is published, but also the information the article is citing when that was published as well. We can also look at something called Science Daily, another great source in which they will actually do constant, or at least many updates in the information that they provide. And they often also even justify why their information or research comes at a certain time. For example, they have this article on cicadas and research on cicadas from 2024. And they justify why it had to happen in 2024 simply because it is very rare and difficult to observe cicada behavior. So going back to the Science News case study, there is actually a similar article on their website that talks about cicadas as well, but as we mentioned before, they don't have any justification for the date, and they don't actually have a clear indication that when the study took place was far, far before when the article is being published. So Science Daily is a better example of using date appropriately because it discloses and clarifies what the date of the research and the article is and for what reason. But finally, like I said, right? Old doesn't necessarily mean automatically bad in context of research, because the Watson and Crick paper from 1953 that was very foundational in establishing the structure of DNA, that paper is still cited very often because of its foundational nature. The other thing to note here is that the Watson and Crick case study, there have been many attempts to repeat it throughout the years, but simply all of the repetitions and attempts to recreate the data actually has come to the same conclusion. So that's why the results have not changed, and that's also why the paper is still cited, because that information hasn't been updated or changed over time, which makes it actually a very reproducible study, and something that, even though it is an old study, even more believable. So sometimes date is very important to be as updated as possible, but sometimes having a long-standing, established foundation is also just as valuable. Next is the second A, which is accuracy. And accuracy is obviously very important. You want your information to be true, but the thing about accuracy, especially within science, is information constantly overturns other information. That is to say, what we believed in multiple decades ago might not be true today. Research always proves other research wrong all the time. And that means that accuracy often has a changing definition. So in this case, let's talk about accuracy in the sense that accuracy is what is generally accepted within the scientific community or experts of a particular field. So it's hard to say accuracy is the objective truth because that's hard to measure. But I think that definition at least gives us some wiggle room to certainly say that there are things that are inaccurate and things that are accurate. Now, to check accuracy, one of the best things you can do is simply see if other sources agree. Just like we said, generalized and accepted information. Another thing you can do within accuracy, though, is also see if they have mechanisms within the publishing organization for fact-checking. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there is a journal called Frontiers, and within that journal, there was one particular study that was published. And basically, this study is titled The Cellular Functions of Spermatogonal Stem Cells in Relation to JAK-STAT Signaling Pathways. That's a mouthful. But what you need to know is that this particular paper was actually retracted, or in other words, unpublished, simply because they actually caught the paper using AI-generated text and images as a part of the final publication. And that was unfortunately missed by a lot of peer evaluation. Now, first of all, that actually kind of teaches us a lesson that peer evaluation is not perfect. It is great, but it's not perfect. But the second thing is that one of the most important aspects of accuracy isn't just making sure you're accurate when you publish, but it's also very important that you admit your mistakes and retract or correct when things are inaccurate. This happens quite often within a lot of newspapers, news outlets, or even academic journals, where things have to be retracted or edited. And that's a good sign of accuracy when an organization is able to admit their own faults and mistakes in the past. Another good source for accuracy, though, could be the scientists. And this is basically a source in which they often will have updates and corrections and retractions based on any new information that might come in. So again, any organization that is able to very consistently update you on accuracy is a good one. And finally, we get to the last letter, and that is your relevance. So relevance in this case means how it is relevant to the information that you are trying to research. So relevance will be subjective and different for everybody. Someone who is trying to learn about a particular topic has a very different thing that they're researching compared to an expert who is trying to make groundbreaking research in the same field. Those two different people need two different forms of research, so different things will be relevant to them. For example, for the absolute expert, they probably have no reason to waste time on Wikipedia. However, for the person who's a complete beginner, Wikipedia might be a very simple and accessible way to at least learn about what this topic even means, and then go from there and learn a lot more about that topic. So relevance is based on what you are trying to achieve within your research and the existing knowledge that you already have. So it's a little bit of a self-reflection. Is this source right for me? So let's use National Geographic actually as our example for relevance. National Geographic does a really good job giving information in an understandable and simple way. This means that it's a great entry point for a lot of people to learn about what's going on within the world and any of the articles that they put out. But most importantly, This means that the unfortunate truth of making it accessible for the average reader is that an expert within the field or someone who's trying to make groundbreaking research, like I said before, probably won't really benefit from a National Geographic article. So once again, your relevance has to be evaluated from the perspective of what you're trying to accomplish. So that's it. That's Radar. Using Radar, this 5-step process will allow you to really look at the source you're using, see, first of all, if it's something that you can trust, but more importantly, if that source is also right for you. And with all of these tools, you're going to be a lot more equipped to make sure that you're able to weed out the bad sources and find the better sources. And also, it might help you a little bit with your self-strategizing for what you're trying to accomplish with your research. And that, in and of itself, is quite valuable. So, hope this helped, and thanks for watching.